Almost 4 years ago, I made a video taking a look at the best player in world football, in my view, at every age from 16 to 40. Today I wanted to do the same thing but just with Premier League players, though immediately I encountered a problem, which is that, currently, there aren't very many very old or very young players in the Premier League. Despite 15-year-old Ethan Nwaneri recently having become the youngest debutant of the Premier League era, not a single 16-year-old has played a minute of football in the Premier League this season, nor have any 39 or 40-year-olds. I was forced to tighten my scope to between the ages of 17 and 38 therefore, and the results, I must admit, I found quite surprising. There'll be lots of honourable mentions and the odd observation dotted throughout, but without further ado, who is 33 years old now but is without a club, never mind a Premier League one, here is, in my view, and in my view only once again, the best player in the Premier League at every age, from 17 to 38. 17. RICO LEWIS. There are only 3 17-year-olds who have played a single minute of Premier League football this season, namely RICO LEWIS at Manchester City, and Bobby Clark and Stefan Bajcevic at Liverpool. I won't pretend to have watched all that much of any of them, but all 3 are highly rated by their coaches, hence why they're already getting first-team football for 2 of the best clubs on the planet at such a young age. From what little I have seen, Lewis is the pick of the bunch, a really quick, intelligent, and versatile footballer who plays predominantly at right back. If you want your mind blowing, Lewis was born in 2004, which means that when he joined the Manchester City Academy, aged 8, Sergio Aguero had already scored that title-winning goal for the Citizens against Queen's Park Rangers. Maybe it's just me, but that made me feel about as old as Manuel Pellegrini. 18. ROMEO LAVIA. Again, there are only actually 5 18-year-olds who have featured in the Premier League so far this season, and I will tell you already that there are only 8 19-year-olds, which is much fewer than the number of teenagers who have played in Europe's other top leagues this season, and perhaps tells you something about youth development in the Premier League. Alejandro Garnacho, who played twice for Manchester United last season and has featured once this season, is deserving of an honourable mention. But I have to say, I was immensely impressed by ROMEO LAVIA before he was sidelined for 6 weeks with a hamstring problem earlier this season. Some of Southampton's transfer business is exquisite, and LAVIA is one such example. Touted for stardom at Manchester City, where everyone knew that he was a gem, LAVIA pushed for a move in the summer, seeking regular game time and knowing that he wouldn't get it at the Etihad ahead of RODRI and Calvin Phillips. Southampton paid between £10 to £12 million to sign the 18-year-old, with Man City inserting a £40 million buyback clause into that deal that I would not be remotely surprised to see triggered at some stage. Quick, industrious, and intelligent, LAVIA describes Sergio Busquets and Fernandinho as his 2 biggest inspirations, and his maturity in midfield at the start of this season, for an 18-year-old no less, suggests that his future could be very bright indeed. 19. Harvey Elliott. As I said, only 8 19-year-olds have actually featured in the Premier League this season, though Harvey Elliott's closest rival for a spot in this list, another Southampton teenager, in the form of Tino Livramento, isn't actually one of those 8, still sidelined through his ACL injury. I think I would still edge towards Elliott, even if Livramento hadn't suffered that long-term setback, and Elliott, of course, suffered a horrible injury all of his own just over a year ago when he dislocated his ankle playing against Leeds United. If it weren't for that setback, I suspect that Elliott would be a full England international now and would be in contention to make Gareth Southgate's World Cup squad, despite the immense competition for places in his position. Not the fastest, Elliott is skillful, creative, and always looks composed, even in the tightest of spaces. Until very recently, the youngest player of the Premier League era, Elliott has already played 30 times for Liverpool, despite that dislocated ankle, where he has played out wide on the right, left, in attacking and, most recently and frequently, in central midfield. 20. ARMEL BELLA-KOTCHAP. I very nearly made it a Liverpool double at 19 and 20, with Harvey Elliott and Fabio Carvalho, both of whom joined Liverpool from Fulham. But it is ARMEL BELLA-KOTCHAP, or ARMEL BELLA-KETCHUP as my iPhone insists on correcting his name to, who features just ahead of Carvalho at the age of 20. I said that Southampton get their recruitment spot on sometimes, and their centre-backs are a fantastic illustration of that fact. Mohamed Salisu is a real gem, who is also only 23 years old, but the sky really is the limit for BELLA-KOTCHAP, who is still only 20 and who joined the Saints over the summer just gone from VfL Bochum, reportedly for a fee of just £8.6 million. That could prove to be one of the Premier League bargains of the century, since BELLA-KOTCHAP has been outstanding so far this season, and despite being born in Paris, he won his first cap for Germany against England during the most recent international break. A reminder therefore, just in case it were needed, that there are still some incredible bargains out there, even in the modern game. An honourable mention goes to Everton's Nathan Patterson, as well as Fabio Carvalho, who I've also been impressed with this season. 21. Bukayo Saka. It is at the age of 21 that we start to get some real competition for inclusions, with two fantastic 21-year-old forwards from Arsenal alone. Gabriel Martinelli has outperformed Bukayo Saka so far this season. Meanwhile, Jacob Ramsey, Amadou Onana, Wesley Fofana, Armando Broja and Anthony Gordon are good value for honourable mentions, but I still think that Saka is the pick of the bunch. Despite having only turned 21 a month ago, Saka is already closing in on 150 first-team appearances at Arsenal, and he has won 20 caps in an extremely competitive position for the England national team. Equally adept on either flank, I still don't think that Saka gets anywhere near the recognition that he deserves. He has already been named as Arsenal Player of the Year for successive seasons and England Player of the Season for the 2021-22 campaign. For someone who only just turned 21, that is absolutely absurd. A constant menace with a fantastic attitude, Saka has a sensational burst of acceleration, he gets his head up and makes good decisions in the final third, and so long as he avoids picking up a serious injury, he seems destined to have a very long and successful career within the game. 22. Erling Haaland. There are some seriously talented 22-year-olds in the Premier League right now, whether that be Julian Alvarez, Reece James, or the immense Phil Foden. But Foden's Manchester City teammate Erling Haaland is a freak, and I mean that in the best possible sense of the term. I'm planning on making an entire video about Haaland before long, primarily about his uniqueness and trying to put him in historical context. Because, in some respects, he really does seem to be one of a kind. So big, both vertically and from shoulder to shoulder, so quick and so strong. Combine those physical attributes with incredibly sharp and intelligent movement, aerial prowess, and an utterly lethal left foot, and you have someone who is, quite simply and provably so far this season, absolutely unplayable. Haaland has scored 14 goals in his first 8 Premier League games, including 3 hat-tricks, and 172 goals in 211 games over the course of his entire career to date. It is hard to see how he could improve, but having only turned 22 over the summer, you certainly can't rule it out. 23. Trent Alexander-Arnold. One of the toughest selection dilemmas in this video, Trent Alexander-Arnold's England teammates, Mason Mount and Declan Rice, are at the very least deserving of honourable mentions, as are Kai Havertz, Martin Odegaard, and Mohamed Salisu, who I mentioned earlier on. Though he is probably enduring his toughest patch of form, and the most scrutiny he has experienced since breaking through at Anfield right now, Trent Alexander-Arnold is still a special talent. Over much of the past 4 seasons, throughout which time Liverpool have been one of the best teams on the planet, if you look at his assists, chances created, and overall influence upon the team, Trent was arguably Liverpool's second most important player, behind only Mohamed Salah. At the age of 23, he already has more assists than all but a handful of fullbacks have made over the course of their entire careers, though I would be happy to hand Declan Rice the crown at age 23 tomorrow when Trent will celebrate his 24th birthday. 24. Marcus Rashford. Until Trent turns 24, it is a toss-up, in my eyes, between Bruno Guimaraes and Marcus Rashford at 24. I actually picked Guimaraes initially, but upon consideration, I think that it has to be Rashford. With honourable mentions, it should be said, for the likes of Marc Cucurella, Eberechi Eze, and most notably of all Cristiano Romero. Guimaraes is a gem and is among the most talented players outside of the Premier League's Big Six. But Rashford has served up a reminder at the start of this season as to just how good he can be. There is this idea, I don't know where it's come from, that Rashford has been off it for about 4 or 5 years. In reality, he had a rotten 2021-22 season, but the year before that, he scored 21 goals despite being injured for almost all of that season, and he struck 22 times during the season before that. So far this season, he has 5 goal contributions in only 7 games, and to have made more than 300 appearances at his age is both remarkable and remarkably stupid in terms of his development and, I suspect, the injury problems that he has had over the last couple of years. But he is still one hell of a player, and he may well prove to be a really important weapon for Erik ten Hag this season. 25. Gabriel Jesus. Some players flourish in Pep Guardiola's very disciplined structure in terms of movements and patterns of play, whilst others look hamstrung and restricted. Gabriel Jesus looked to be a generational talent when he broke through at Palmeiras and at the 2016 Olympics. And I still remember his first Premier League start for Man City against West Ham taking my breath away. Jesus went on to have 5.5 very impressive seasons at Man City, but he was never the main man, illustrated by the fact that he still couldn't nail down a starting berth last season, whilst being the only centre-forward at the club. Now the shackles are off though, and we are seeing the Jesus of old, in terms of his footwork and invention, combined with the work rate and physicality that he built up at the Etihad. The result is something quite frightening, for opponents at least, and Erling Haaland is arguably the only centre-forward who has been more impressive than him in the Premier League this season. Honourable mentions go to Ruben Dias, Luis Diaz, Diogo Jota, Alan Saint-Maximin, and James Maddison. 26. RODRI. Anyone who is familiar with this channel will be well aware of my affection for RODRI, who I thought seemed expensive when Manchester City met his £62.6 million release clause, and he has been making me look very stupid for thinking that ever since. The closest thing that I've seen to Sergio Busquets as a contemporary player, and a higher compliment I can scarcely imagine, RODRI's touch, technique, vision, awareness, and weight of pass are all superb. He's also deceptively quick and strong, he eats up ground really well, and he can score the odd thunderbolt. An honourable mention goes to Ivan Toney, who has been superb this season, but RODRI takes this one without breaking a sweat, which is often, incidentally, how he conducts games. 27. Raheem Sterling. It is a battle between current England and former Manchester City teammates Raheem Sterling and Jack Grealish for supremacy at the age of 27, and I don't think that it is an easy decision. Manchester City clearly felt that with the arrival of Erling Haaland, the ingenuity and creativity of Phil Foden and Jack Grealish would be more useful to them on the flanks than the direct threat posed by someone like Sterling, who felt that he was poorly treated by the club. I think that Grealish is superb, but for my money, Sterling is England's second most important player, behind only Harry Kane. He remains ludicrously underrated, and he will go down as both an all-time England and Premier League great. A tremendous athlete, lightning quick, and brilliant on the ball, Sterling's movement is among the best in world football, and among the best that I've ever seen. And double figures for goals for 9 successive seasons as a 27-year-old is reflective of that fact. He will make that 10 straight seasons this season, already with 4 goals in 9 games for Chelsea, where he is the club's most potent attacking threat. 28. Bernardo Silva. Probably the hardest decision up to this point. I flip-flopped a fair few times between Manchester City teammates Bernardo Silva and João Cancelo at the age of 28, with honourable mentions to the likes of Fabinho and Andy Robertson. I think Cancelo is actually the best fullback in all of world football, and certainly the best in the Premier League, which initially made me lean towards him. But then, how can you overlook Bernardo Silva? Well, ultimately, I couldn't. The little Portuguese magician is a force of nature at his best, combining the skill and attacking attributes of a luxury player with the pressing, ground coverage, and intensity of a midfield workhorse. It wasn't their most notable piece of summer transfer business, but I think that keeping hold of Bernardo Silva was absolutely crucial for Manchester City in their pursuit of several trophies this season. 29. Harry Kane. Ending a run of 4 successive current or former Man City players, Harry Kane's spot in this list was never in any doubt. In fact, aside from the fact that Kane is one of the best players in the Premier League and one of the best forwards in world football, there is surprisingly little competition in the Premier League at the age of 29, despite it being an age around which many footballers peak. As far as I can make out, the closest competitor to Kane would probably be Wilfried Zaha at Crystal Palace. Unlike Zaha, Kane was not an immediate superstar during his teenage years, but once he broke through at Tottenham in the 2014-15 season, foolishly labelled as a one-season wonder by some, there was absolutely no looking back. Having only turned 29 in pre-season, Kane has already scored 255 goals in 396 games for Tottenham, putting him just 11 goals behind Spurs' all-time top scorer Jimmy Greaves, and he has bagged 51 goals from 75 caps for England, putting him just 2 goals shy of Wayne Rooney's all-time record with the 3 lines. Only Erling Haaland has scored more goals than Kane this season, and he will be hoping to break both of those records before the season concludes. 30. Mohamed Salah. Like so many Liverpool players, and indeed the team themselves, Mohamed Salah hasn't been at his scintillating best so far this season, though he does still have 9 goal contributions in only 11 appearances, which would be considered world-class form for just about anyone else. This isn't the most in-form Premier League player at every age though, it is the best at every age, and there is no doubt therefore that, at the age of 30, it has to be Mohamed Salah, ahead of honourable mentions such as Alisson, Casemiro, and most notably Heung-min Son. Since signing for Liverpool, Salah has scored 160 goals and made 67 assists in 264 appearances, which works out at about 0.85 goal contributions a game. It is just an outstanding output and consistency over more than 5 years, and his record of 0.82 goal contributions a game so far this season is actually not far off that average. 31. Kevin De Bruyne. Still the best player in the Premier League for my money, though if Erling Haaland continues to score a hat-trick every game, perhaps he will be relegated to second in those particular rankings. Kevin De Bruyne has been the best midfielder on the planet, again, in my view, for at least the last 3 seasons. Signed by Manchester City for a then club record £55 million fee from Wolfsburg in 2015, the Sky Sports news panel infamously claimed that was a terrible piece of business. De Bruyne has since become the star man for a team that has won 4 Premier League titles during his 7 seasons there, and if he spends just another couple of years in England, I think that he will go down as the best midfielder of the Premier League era. With that in mind, sanctioning his sale must surely go down as the worst thing that Roman Abramovich has ever done. He what? Oh, alright. Maybe not then. Honourable mentions go to Virgil van Dijk, N'Golo Kante, Thiago Alcantara and others, but in reality, none of them ever stood a chance. 32. Kyle Walker. It was a toss-up between 2 England right-backs, Kyle Walker and Kieran Trippier, and fellow England international and Liverpool captain Jordan Henderson at the age of 32. I think that Henderson has been spectacularly underrated for much of the last 5 years, but maybe hasn't been at his best with 1 or 2 injuries over the last 12 to 15 months. Trippier has probably been the most impressive of the three so far this season, but it is Walker who takes the crown for me. Once a reckless and hot-headed speed machine at right back for Spurs, whilst Walker still has his moments of rashness, they have become highly infrequent. Meanwhile, his positioning and awareness have both come on leaps and bounds. He is a formidable athlete and footballer, and one of the greatest right-backs that the Premier League has ever seen, which I think is enough to feature ahead of Trippier and Henderson. 33. Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang. Only recently having returned to the Premier League, Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang is my choice at 33, narrowly ahead of recent Tottenham signing Ivan Perisic. Aubameyang's Premier League career with Arsenal was nothing if not eventful, and after 3 years as the club's star man, during a difficult period for Arsenal, a decline in form, ill discipline, and a fallout with Mikel Arteta led to his departure. Whatever his flaws, Aubameyang's strengths are inarguable, scoring goals being chief among them. He did that at Saint Etienne, he did it at Borussia Dortmund, and he did it at Barcelona, before returning to the Premier League. No longer as lightning quick as he once was, which used to be his defining attribute, Aubameyang's movement remains outstanding, and he has already scored 1 goal in 1 game, back in the Premier League with Chelsea. 34. Jonny Evans. With all due respect to Jonny Evans, and I'm not just saying that because I do think that he is a very good centre-back who has had a really distinguished career, but the candidates that the Premier League offers up at the age of 34 are, let's just say, a little underwhelming. Adam Lallana is probably the next best shout, a fantastic midfielder whose career has been ravaged by injuries, and it should actually be said, as was the case with the teenage years, that there are only actually 5 34-year-olds who have played a single minute of Premier League football this season. Jonny Evans is one of them, having played 720 minutes to be specific, in a notoriously leaky Leicester City defence. That is, unfamiliar territory for Evans, who has been a rock at the back for both the Foxes, West Brom, and at Manchester United, particularly under Alex Ferguson before that. Ferguson was supposedly outraged when Louis van Gaal allowed Evans to leave Old Trafford, and time has been kind to that outrage. Evans has been solid, consistent, and often underappreciated, whilst his younger centre-back partners from Harry Maguire to Chagla Soyuncu and Wesley Fofana have tended to take all of the credit in the national press. 35. HUGO LLORIS. Jamie Vardy's difficult start to the season made this a slightly easier decision, as whilst HUGO LLORIS has certainly had his moments in a Tottenham shirt, and there have been times when I've thought that his best days were behind him and that Spurs ought to try and identify a new number one, his contribution over what is now more than a decade in North London has been immense. France's second most capped player of all time, and now just 3 caps behind Lilian Thuram, Lloris has played 426 games for Tottenham, which puts him 10th in the club's all-time appearance charts. Of course, Jamie Vardy, despite being without a goal in 8 games so far this season, deserves a very honourable mention, and to still be the starting centre-forward in a Premier League team at the age of 35 is no mean feat. Albeit, I do think that Patson Daka deserves to start more games going forward and can become a real weapon for Brendan Rodgers. 36. João Moutinho. There are just 2 36-year-olds who have played any Premier League football this season, and inconveniently for me at least, it is quite difficult to split them. They are João Moutinho at Wolves and James Milner at Liverpool. 2 very different footballers, but both of whom have enjoyed remarkable longevity and success within the game. Moutinho has won 146 caps for Portugal, a tally that is bettered only by Cristiano Ronaldo, and whilst Milner could never really nail down a starting berth for England long term, he ranks 4th in the Premier League era's appearance charts on 595 appearances and counting. I have gone with Moutinho, who is more important for Wolves than Milner is for Liverpool, and has suffered less of a decline in recent years due to being less dependent upon his athleticism. So smart, gifted on the ball, and accurate in the pass, Wolves signed Moutinho for just £5 million from Monaco in 2018, and what a bargain that has turned out to be. 37. Cristiano Ronaldo. The only man to have won more caps for Portugal than João Moutinho, Cristiano Ronaldo might be struggling to get a game at Manchester United at the moment, but his only competition in terms of Premier League 37-year-olds comes in the form of Łukasz Fabianski and Ashley Young. Fabianski, you could actually make a case for, still starting games for West Ham, and an incredibly underrated goalkeeper, in my eyes at least. But I wasn't prepared to sacrifice my own life and having my house torched down by saying that Łukasz Fabianski is better than Cristiano Ronaldo. Obviously one of the two greatest players of his generation, and one of the greatest goal scorers to have ever lived, Ronaldo's place in history is indisputable, and he remains capable of scoring goals when a team plays to his strengths. He struck 18 times in 30 Premier League games last season, but whilst Ronaldo's own output was very good, Manchester United's collective overall output, and indeed points tally, declined. Erik ten Hag clearly has one or two concerns about Ronaldo's athletic abilities, industry, or even his capability to score the same number of goals this season as he did last season. And as the division's highest earner, I would not be at all surprised to see a separation occur during the January transfer window. For now though, he rightfully features at age 37. 38. Thiago Silva. Given the fact that, let's be honest, since Kevin De Bruyne, I'd say the quality of inclusions, honourable mentions, and just the general lack of competition from 32 to 37 is slightly surprising for the richest and currently the strongest league in world football. It is welcome, but also slightly surprising in of itself, to have such a strong inclusion at the age of 38, especially given that Thiago Silva is an outfield player. Obviously, you expect 25 through to 32 to 33 to have the strongest candidates given the way in which footballers develop, but the lack of options in the teens and almost all of the 30s, and even at the age of 29, plus the plethora of really talented players in their early 20s like Haaland, James and Foden at 22 alone, well, I found that quite interesting. Nope, just me. Alrighty then. I wouldn't say that Thiago Silva is one of the greatest centre-backs of all time, but at this point, I certainly feel as though he belongs to that bracket just below that. Given the extraordinary way in which his career began, in terms of his tuberculosis diagnosis, inadvertent rhyme there, and his retirement from football at the age of 20, what he has done since then is one of football's all-time great comebacks. Even now, at the grand old age of 38, in purely footballing terms, Silva still looks to be one of the best centre-backs in the Premier League, and you wouldn't bet against him playing into his 40s, either at Chelsea or elsewhere. That is it for today's video, but thank you all sincerely for watching. I hope that you enjoyed it. Hit the like button if that was the case, let me know your thoughts down below in the comments, and feel free to subscribe and turn on notifications for HITC Sevens. You can also find me on Twitter or on Instagram via the username @HITC Sevens on both.